My name is Richard Voss and I am 61 years old. 3 weeks ago, I sat across from a boat dealer named Marcus Webb and told him something my own son didn't know yet. I told him that the sale was never valid. Not $1 of it. My son Daniel had walked into that dealership on a Tuesday morning and sold my late wife's 1962 Chris Craft, a boat Elaine restored plank by plank over 4 summers, for $18,000. He signed the papers with a smile. He told the dealer it was his inheritance to do with as he pleased. 2 days later he was on a flight to Paris with a woman I had met exactly en Xmil. He thought the money was his. He thought the boat was his. He thought I would find out after it was already gone, the way you find out about weather that's already passed. He was wrong about all 3 things. The next afternoon, Marcus Webb called me, not Daniel, because something in the paperwork didn't sit right with him. And when I explained what that boat actually was, and who actually owned it, his voice went very quiet on the other end of the line. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 9 years, to a dock in October, when Elaine said something to me I didn't understand until the day that phone rang. The boathouse smelled like varnish and lake water. A smell I can still find in my sleep if I try hard enough. Elaine bought the Chris Craft the year Daniel turned 20, a wreck of a thing with a cracked hull and an engine nobody wanted to touch. She wasn't a boat person before that. She became one because her father had owned one just like it, and he'd died before he could teach her to run it. She used to say the smell of marine varnish was the closest thing she had to his voice. She named it Elaine's Grace, which embarrassed her a little, so mostly we just called it the Grace. I remember one October evening, cold enough that our breath showed, the lake flat and silver under a sky that couldn't decide if it wanted rain. Elaine sanding the transom by lamplight, her hands raw, sawdust caught in her hair like gray snow. Daniel was 17 then, leaning in the doorway with his arms crossed, watching her the way you watch something you don't understand and don't want to. "Why don't you just buy a new one?" he said. Not a question. A complaint. Elaine didn't look up. "Because this one remembers things," she said. "A new one doesn't remember anything yet." He rolled his eyes. I laughed, because I thought it was one of her strange, lovely sentences, the kind she said and then let go of, like smoke. I didn't understand until years later that she wasn't talking about the boat. Daniel was never cruel as a boy. He was something quieter and, in its way, more dangerous. He was someone who measured love and what it cost him. He'd help Elaine sand the hull for 20 minutes, then vanish for the rest of the afternoon, and come back asking what the boat was worth now. Not what it meant. What it was worth. Elaine noticed. She never said much about it. She just started keeping a small leather notebook in the drawer of the boathouse desk, and she'd write in it after Daniel left, her pen moving slow and deliberate. I never asked what was in it. I assumed it was maintenance notes. I was wrong about that too. Our house smelled like coffee and cedar and, faintly, always, like the lake, but Daniel's room, even as a boy, smelled like nothing. Sterile. Tidy. A room that belonged to someone already planning his exit. By the time he was 25, he called Elaine Mom the way other people say ma'am, polite, distant, transactional. He visited on holidays and asked, almost every time, when we planned to downsize. He used that word for the house. He used it, once, for the Grace. That's the word they use for everything that used to be love. There's a meal I remember from that same autumn, the 4 of us, Elaine, Daniel, myself, and Elaine's sister, around the kitchen table. The smell of her pot rose thick in the air, candles burning because the power had flickered earlier and she never bothered relighting the overheads once she'd lit candles. Daniel ate quickly, checked his phone twice under the table, and asked, halfway through dessert, whether we'd thought about what would happen to all this when we were gone. Elaine set down her fork. She didn't answer him directly. She just looked at me, and I understood, even then, that something had shifted in how she saw our son. I sensed something cooling in him long before Elaine got sick. I had no proof, no name for it. Just a small, cold draft under a closed door. Elaine was diagnosed in March. She was gone by November. The illness moved fast enough that we didn't have time to be surprised by each stage, only exhausted by it. She spent her last clear weeks not writing letters to me. We'd already said everything two people can say to each other in 34 years, but on the phone with a lawyer named Priya Anand, 3 long calls I wasn't invited to sit in on. It's about the grace, she told me once, when I asked. And a few other things. Let me finish it my way. I let her. That was the kind of marriage we had. 2 weeks after the funeral, I stood outside Daniel's old bedroom door. He'd flown in for a few days, was staying in the house, and I heard him on the phone with someone. His voice had a brightness in it I hadn't heard since he was a boy, asking what the boat was worth. No, it's basically mine now, he was saying. Dad won't even notice for a while. It's just sitting in that boathouse depreciating. I could get maybe 20 for it, easy, and honestly he owes me that much for staying out here every summer pretending to care about fishing. A pause. Then a laugh, light, easy, the laugh of a man who believes he has already won something. Paris, he said. I've wanted to take her to Paris since we started dating. This is basically a sign. I stood very still in the hallway. I did not open the door. I did not confront him. I went downstairs, made a cup of tea I didn't drink, and sat in Elaine's chair by the window until the light changed. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment. It wasn't rage. Rage would have been easier. Rage burns fast and then it's over. What I felt was quieter and colder, something closer to recognition. Like watching a shape you'd suspected in the dark finally step into the light. I had spent 34 years being the person who smoothed things over, who made excuses for Daniel's distance, who told Elaine, more than once, he loves us in his own way. I realized, sitting in her chair, that I had been protecting him from consequences his whole life, and that Elaine had quietly, in a leather notebook, in 3 phone calls I wasn't invited to, had stopped doing that months before she died. She had seen this exact moment coming. She had planned for it while I was still making excuses. I didn't know yet what she'd done. I only knew, with total certainty, that I was no longer going to warn Daniel about anything. I was going to watch. In the weeks after that, I started noticing all the small ways Daniel had already begun treating our lives like assets to be settled. He asked, gently, whether I'd thought about simplifying the house. He mentioned, more than once, a financial advisor friend of his who could help me organize things. Each time, I smiled, said I'd think about it, and said nothing to Elaine's lawyer about what I was noticing, not because I didn't trust Priya, but because I wanted, for once, to be the one quietly gathering information instead of the one being managed. That is the moment I became invisible to him, and the moment I decided to let him believe it. 3 days after I overheard him, I found an envelope taped to the underside of the boathouse desk drawer. My name on the front, in Elaine's handwriting, the ink slightly faded like she'd written it months before she needed me to find it. Inside was a single card, the name and number of Priya Anand, and 4 words in Elaine's hand. Call her. She knows. I didn't call that day. I sat with the envelope for 2 full days first, the way you sit with something before you're ready to know what it means. On the 3rd morning, I called. Priya Anand's voice was calm in the particular way of people who are used to delivering enormous news gently. I've been expecting your call, Mr. Voss, she said. Elaine set up an irrevocable trust for the boat 14 months ago. It's held separately from the estate. Daniel has no legal title to it, he never did. Any sale he attempts is void. The buyer would have no legitimate claim to the vessel, and Daniel would be personally liable for selling property that isn't his. I sat in Elaine's chair again, the phone warm against my ear, and for the first time in weeks I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because I finally understood the leather notebook, the 3 private calls, the sentence she'd said 9 years ago in the boathouse. This one remembers things. She hadn't just meant the boat. She'd meant that she remembered exactly who Daniel was, long before the rest of us let ourselves see it. Priya walked me through it slowly, the way you'd explain something to someone still catching their breath. The trust named a marine title company that had to verify ownership before any transfer could be finalized. The moment Daniel tried to sell the Grace to a licensed dealer, the paperwork would trigger a title search. The title search would find the trust. The trust would name me as sole trustee, with full authority to unwind any unauthorized sale. Elaine hadn't stopped him. She'd simply built a door that looked wide open and led nowhere. I asked Priya why Elaine hadn't just told Daniel directly that the boat wasn't his to sell. A simple conversation, months earlier, that would have avoided all of this. Priya was quiet for a moment before she answered. She told me she'd had that conversation with him before, in different words, about different things, more times than she could count, she said. She said telling him never changed anything. She said showing him might. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. Elaine had spent 34 years hoping words would reach him. In her last year, she'd finally stopped hoping and started building instead. 2 weeks later, I heard Daniel on the phone again, this time laughing about dealership paperwork, mentioning a name, Marcus Webb, out at Lakeside Marine, and a date, the following Tuesday. $18,000, he said. Cash within the week. Paris by Thursday. I texted Priya 2 words that night. He's moving. She replied within a minute. Let him. I remember standing at the window that night, watching Daniel's rental car in the driveway, his suitcase already packed and waiting by the door for a trip funded by a boat he did not own. He went to bed that night certain he had gotten away with something. He had no idea he was already caught. Have you ever had to stay silent to protect yourself even when every part of you wanted to speak up? Tell me in the comments. I read them. Priya laid it out for me in plain terms over coffee that Friday. Once Daniel completed the sale, Lakeside Marine's title search would flag the trust automatically. That was standard procedure for any vessel over a certain value. At that point, Marcus Webb would be legally obligated to freeze the transaction and contact the trustee of record. Me. Daniel would not be arrested. Elaine hadn't built this to punish him with handcuffs. But he would owe the dealership $18,000 he no longer had, having already spent it on plane tickets and a hotel on the Rue de Rivoli. And the boat, the Grace, would come back to the boathouse, exactly. Elaine had always intended it to stay. You could stop this before it happens, Priya said. One phone call to Daniel. He'd be furious, but it would end there. I thought about that for a long moment. Part of me wanted to. The part of me that had spent 34 years smoothing his path, making the call, softening the landing before he ever felt the ground. But I thought about Elaine's leather notebook, and the 3 private phone calls, and the envelope taped beneath the drawer with my name on it in handwriting she must have known, even then, might be the last new thing I ever saw her write. She hadn't built a trap. She'd built a lesson, timed to arrive exactly when he needed it most and exactly when I would have the strength to let it. No, I told Priya. Let it happen the way she planned it. 2 nights before the sale, Daniel called me, a rare thing, these days. His voice had a warmth in it I hadn't heard in years, the kind of warmth that shows up right before someone needs something. I'd been thinking, Dad, he said. Maybe I should come stay with you for a while after Paris. Help you out around the house. I know it's been hard since Mom. A pause, calculated to land soft. Family should take care of each other. I recognized the shape of it immediately, the fake kindness that arrives exactly when someone needs your goodwill for something else. Elaine had warned me about this, in her way, 9 years ago, without either of us knowing what it meant yet. I'll think about it, I said. He seemed satisfied with that. He always was, when I said it. That same week, my granddaughter Mia, Daniel's daughter, 12 years old, staying with a cousin while her father traveled, asked me why I look sad all the time now. I told her I missed her grandmother. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth, and she knew it the way children always know when adults are folding a bigger feeling into a smaller word. I went out to the boathouse alone the night before the sale. I sat on the Grace's old bench seat, ran my hand along the transom Elaine had sanded smooth by lamplight, and let myself feel, fully, for the first time, how much I missed her, and how strange it was that even now, even gone, she was still protecting the things she loved. I almost called Daniel that night. I almost warned him, the way I'd warned him about everything his whole life, the way I'd told Elaine, more than once, that he loved us in his own way. I wish this were different. I wish Daniel had been the kind of son who would have kept the Grace out of love instead of appraised it out of habit. I wish he had needed nothing from us but our company. But wishes don't hold up. The trust his mother built does. I cried that night quietly, in the dark boathouse, not from weakness, but because I finally understood, completely, what Elaine had known and I hadn't wanted to admit. I did not call him. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because this story is about to turn. The sale happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel flew to Paris that same night. At 11:50 p.m., 3 days later, my phone rang. Priya Anand's name on the screen. Marcus Webb just called me, she said. The title search flagged the trust an hour ago. He's holding the boat in the dealership's lot. He needs to speak with the trustee of record before he can release the funds or the title. That's you. I sat at the kitchen table, the house silent around me, Elaine's reading glasses still folded on the counter where she'd left them 11 months ago. I opened my laptop and read through the documents Priya sent the trust, the title flag, the notice of unauthorized transfer, and I signed where she told me to sign. Marcus Webb, on hold with Priya's paralegal, ended the call satisfied that the matter would resolve cleanly the next morning. 12:03 a.m. I am 61. I am the sole trustee of my late wife's estate, and, as of that signature, legal owner of a boat my son believed he had already spent the money from. And 3,000 miles away, in a hotel room on the Rue de Rivoli, my son was almost certainly asleep, dreaming of a boat that was never his and money that was never real. He would find that out in about 9 hours. Daniel called me from Paris the next afternoon, his voice tight in a way I recognized instantly. Dad, there's a problem with the boat sale. The dealer's saying something about a trust, he's saying the money's frozen, that I have to pay it back, that he stopped. Did you know about this? I did, I said. Come. Nothing more. You let me do this? His voice cracked on let, like the word itself surprised him. Your mother set it up 14 months before she died, I said. I only found out about it myself, 3 weeks ago. I didn't stop you, Daniel, because it was never mine to stop. It was hers. There was a long silence on the line, the kind of silence I recognized from years of watching him calculate his next move and find, for once, that there wasn't one. He looked, in my mind's eye, exactly like the boy in the boathouse doorway asking what the boat was worth now. He still didn't understand it wasn't a question with a number for an answer. He owed Marcus Webb $18,000 he no longer had. He was in Paris on money that technically belonged to a dealership he'd have to repay from whatever he could scrape together. And the Grace was already back in our boathouse by the following weekend, exactly where she belonged. Marcus Webb called me himself the next day, apologetic in a professional sort of way, though he had nothing to apologize for. I've handled a lot of estate disputes, he told me, but I've never seen one where the person who set the trap has been gone for almost a year. Your wife thought a long way ahead, Mr. Voss. I told him she always had. It was the truest thing I said all week. Daniel flew home 3 days early, the Paris trip cut short by phone calls to his bank and a hotel bill he couldn't ex. He didn't come straight to the house. He went first to the boathouse, alone, and sat there for almost an hour before he came to find me. I don't know exactly what happened in that hour. I didn't ask. Some things a person has to sit with by themselves before they're ready to say anything about them. He looked at me on that call like I was still the man he thought he was. I wasn't. I hadn't been for 11 months. Elaine used to say the Grace remembered things a new boat never could. For years I thought she meant the dents, the old repairs, the small scars a boat collects the way a person does. She meant something else. She meant that the things we build with real love carry a kind of memory that outlasts us, a memory sharp enough to protect what we made even after we're gone. Daniel paid back Lakeside Marine over the following year, in installments, quietly, without ever raising the subject with me again. We speak now, but carefully, the way two people speak after a long silence has taught them both something. Priya Anand still handles the estate, she stops by every few months, more out of friendship now than obligation. Mia comes to the boathouse with me most Saturdays. I'm teaching her to sand a hull the way her grandmother taught me, slow strokes, the wood warming under your palm. As for me, I still have the Grace. She sits in the boathouse, patched and steady, smelling like varnish and lake water and, if I let myself imagine it, faintly like Elaine's hands. I think about her every time I run my palm along that transom. Mia asked me last Saturday why the boat has a woman's name. I told her the truth, that her great-grandmother named it after herself because she wanted something on the water that would outlast her. Mia thought about that for a while, the way children do when they're turning an idea over rather than just hearing it. Like a promise, she said. I told her that was exactly right. And I think, some people protect what they love with locks. She protected it with patience. If you've ever had to let someone learn a hard lesson on their own, even someone you loved, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe. There are more to come.